Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. And let me say, Hotep, Abaragani, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, but certainly never good night and never ever goodbye, because I still get traumatized by goodbyes. My name is the Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. I'm the pastor of New Life Institutional Baptist Church, and we're located at 8916 South Main Street here in the beautiful city of Los Angeles. And we're being hosted by our host church, the Shiloh Missionary Christian Church, of which my good friend, the Dr. Della F. Holness, is the proud pastor. What you are viewing or listening to is entitled, a program which we entitle It's Time, and it's always time for environmental justice, and environmental justice must always address the effects of long presence of systemic racism in this nation. We call it systemic now, but it was originally, we call it institutional lies, because if the man could be smiling in your face, but if the institution was against you, he could smile all day and pat you on the back, but you're not going to get nothing. You sure don't get no loan, you don't get no mortgage, and if you're not careful, you're not going to get no good health care. And if you want to separate citizenship, health care is the line of demarcation. We have what we call the political predeterminants of health, of good health, or the politics of good health. And they all start with one thing: economics. And in our case, you could have the economics and the insurance, but you still get second-class treatment and short shrift unless you sternly speak up for yourself. And you run the risk of getting put out of the hospital, but that's about the only way for us to guarantee ourselves a modicum of good health care, is to speak up. Because if you don't speak up, you're doomed in these hospitals. And especially if you're black, like me, or if you're old, like me, and if you're old and black, now you really understand what the problem is. It has been noted and has been said that racism is the #1 disease in this country, because of how it permeates and how it violates and how it systematically intervenes in so many and in all of our events, occupations, and circumstances and situations that we confront in this country. I was looking at a program that was talking about the racism in the highway building, and some guy on television on Fox News, they called him Tucker Carlson. He said, well, the concrete is not racist, and iron rods that you put down there to pour the concrete, those are not racist. No, but the policy of where the interstate highways path would lead, that's where the racism was occurring. Because a lot of times what the highway department was calling blighted and nuisance areas was the pristine areas, residential areas, business areas of our people. And of course that was under Jim Crow, of course, and but the highway planners made it a point to put that highway dead through the heart of the black business districts, or the black residential areas. The Interstate 10 ripped up what we used to call Sugar Hill. It divided it on one side from the other. And it could have gone a few blocks south, or it could have gone a few blocks north, but they chose to put it dead through where the Negroes had their houses. And back in those days, you had Rochester and the man that played Kingfish, Mr. Moore, and Hattie McDaniels. They all had their houses in that area, but they did not have sway with the city council or with the commission downtown, of course. So the highways really did a job on the black neighborhoods and the black communities. And so that was the racism that was manifested even in the building of the highways. And back in Houston, Highway 59, it destroyed most of 5th Ward and a lot of 3rd Ward in order to put that Highway 59 highway and the what they call the 610 loop. They made sure that they came all through the best of the black neighborhoods. And remember, during that time, they didn't have to give you nothing for your house, but you had to move. And when you had to move, they give you what they want you to have. And when you got to where you were going, you didn't have enough money to afford the relocation. And so those type of problems snowballed and escalated, and the cumulative effect was that we were again find ourselves behind the eight ball, as it were. And then once the concrete was laid and the highway had been dedicated and opened up, with no sense in you saying nothing, you were just out of luck, or out of a house, or out of your property. And so these type of things are what I reference, I think about when I look at a scripture in Ephesians chapter 6, picking up the reading at verse 11, where it says, "Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil." And then verse number 12 is the clincher, for regardless of who the governor is, or who the mayor is, or who the city councilman is, the scripture says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." And that is where we are as a nation and as a people, and that is where the society is right now. The January 6th committee is trying to get to the bottom of the causes of the insurrection, who were the principals, who were the insiders, and I thought there was a law in the city codes that says if you incite a riot that you can be arrested. But yet you don't see Donald Trump being arrested for inciting that mayhem and that chaos and that insurrection and that rebellion and that treason that occurred on January 6, 2021. They are skirting around it. They don't want to bring no criminal charges. They say, well, he's out of office and all that type of thing. But you know, if it wasn't for the fact that this system is going to protect its principles, then he would have been brought away in handcuffs and made to do the perp walk and all that type of thing, even though he's out of office. And so it just goes to show you the power of white supremacy, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Patriot ones, and the Ku Klux Klan, and all of their derivatives that are still exerting their influence on this nation to its detriment, to the detriment of every person who is a tax-paying citizen or is being supported by the taxpayers. We are in a peculiar spot. And we must not stop at Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is not the source. The source is the system itself that must be reformed, that must be dismantled, and must be rebuilt piece by piece to make up what the original framework of the Constitution called a more perfect union. Because we don't have that more perfect union. Of course, the word more perfect union itself is an oxymoron, but we don't need to get into that. But you can see the way that the law is being applied. The Department of Justice is very shy about bringing any type of charges against these people that would give them some serious time. But if it was a Black Lives Matter, they would throw the book at them and would have brought them up on treason, charges of treason already. And they would make it stick. But when you're dealing with the sympathizers of white supremacy, and when you consider the fact that historically a lot of your sheriffs and a lot of your National Guards and a lot of your police were in league with the mob and the rioters who destroyed black cities and black towns and black suburbs or residential areas, then you can see why it is so difficult now to make the Department of Justice bring any type of meaningful charges against the people who actually coordinated and orchestrated and planned and executed the series of events that led to the injury of the officers, police officers, that led to the breaching of the Capitol at 13 points, and from the west side to the east side, the invasion of that sacred space by rioters bent on overturning the democracy that is so delicate and fragile that we must constantly be vigilant about, as they say. But yet, if you litter and you black, you'll get subject to wind up dead. If you have a light out on your car, subject to wind up dead, because the policeman will escalate the traffic stop into a life or death struggle. And they have the weapons, they have the guns, they have the law on their side, and so they win. I am deeply concerned about the fact that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. And when you see the people that are being paraded before the cameras in the January 6th committee hearing, while you hear some of the finest minds, legal minds, and constitutional scholars who not only know the law, but they know how to violate that law, and yet smile and ask for a presidential pardon while they're doing it. If Mike Pence had been black, or if Donald Trump had been black, you think they would have been able to carry off this big lie that they have spread all across the length and breadth of this nation. And remember, there are 139 members of the House of Representatives who actually bonded together to defeat, or to try to defeat, the democratic process, the will of the people on January 6th. That's why they were there. They wanted to stop the vote, stop the counting of the votes. And all of these things are, in my mind, the legacy of that original Constitution that had what you call the 3/5 compromise, and then the Electoral College, which was itself a nod to the slave owning industry. And those things are what are biting us on the behind now. Is that Electoral College? It should have been done away with at the end of the Civil War, but no, they kept the Electoral College, and now look at how evil fruit it has borne, and that fruit is still metastasizing. One of the things that one of the witnesses testifying, Lutzen, whatever he was, he's a very conservative. But even he said that if this thing is not brought to bear, or is not brought to heal, why, it will continue to metastasize in the 2024 election. And that was a bold statement for him to make, but he was honest enough to let the committee realize, or try to make them realize, that this thing is not over. These people are not going away. Donald Trump gave the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and the original Ku Klux Klan, gave them license. He gave them new significance that they do not deserve, but he gave it to them. He made them the moral equals of those who really are trying to do what is best for the nation. But now you have what you call competing ideas in the marketplace of ideas, as the late conservative pundit Rush Limbaugh was fond of saying. And so that is the world in which, that is the fruit of racism, white supremacy, and we are wrestling against flesh and wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against what? The principalities, the people with the authority, the people with the agency, whether it's delegated power or it is the raw power. All right, and so all of these secretaries and chairmen and presidents of these various corporations and auxiliaries and think tanks, those people are pulling the strings behind the scenes. I don't see them, you don't see them, but that's why you can't concentrate on just one name. You got to be looking with a discerning eye at the real causes of January 6th. And the cause is this ongoing systemic racism that started way back yonder with Columbus, or even before Columbus, when they began to propagate the idea of a white supremacist. You should always read the speech of the late Alexander Stephens, who said in so many words that when they began to say why that they were willing to rip up the Union and tap the Union and secede, even though Abraham Lincoln said secession is the essence of anarchy. But those who were what you call fire eaters, they felt that their livelihood and indeed their welfare depended on slavery. And so when you are willing to reduce a person to a thing to be sold or to be auctioned off or to be bought and then to be held as property, then of course you can see that the Constitution was a compromise with evil from its founding. And you have even now those who say, well, we are strict constructionists, we want to construct our rulings on the original Constitution. Well, that original Constitution was faulty, as Thurgood Marshall said, and it was faulty in its premise, and it was faulty in who it sought to include, and it was certainly faulty in who it excluded, because it excluded women, it excluded Negroes or colored people, however you want to call us at that time. We were excluded. We were not, in a positive sense, included, even in the Second Amendment, which I have discoursed on here before. That when the Second Amendment was written, it didn't have us in mind as a positive, but it had us in mind as the cause why a well-regulated militia was necessary. It was put down what they called at that time servile uprising. Servile uprising. That means the slaves may rise up against the slave master, the slave mistress in the night. And the white folks would come out deputized, and that's where the origin of the police power in this nation. It was nothing about the British Bobby, no. It was strictly a defensive move to keep the slaves under control. Every able-bodied white man was allowed to carry a gun, but every able-bodied black person was prohibited from carrying a gun. There was a play, Roscoe Lee Brown was talking about guns and the N-words, and he said that's a pejorative, an oxymoron. A black man with a gun in America always been an oxymoron. That's a pejorative. And that's why the police are quick to shoot you if there's suspicion that you might have a weapon. Not see the weapon, no, just suspicion that you might have one. And they can use deadly force, lethal force, against you justifiably, because that is written in the Constitution. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And remember, the people at that time was only white people. It was not written for the slave. Well, it was written because of the slave, but not for the slave. It was written that the white man would preserve his whiteness or his survival depending upon how he could keep the black person or the Negro, if you will, or if you please, in his place. And which was, as Alexander Stephens delineated, articulated, in the subordinate position, under the control and the direction and the governance of the superior race. So the superior race, according to Alexander Stephens, was the European. And the inferior race, according to that same Alexander Stephens, was the African. Remember that when the Robert E. Lee invaded Pennsylvania, they began to round up free blacks and send them back south because 5 minutes. Because they held that doctrine that even a free black ain't had no business out there without the supervision of a white man. And this is what his soldiers were doing when they invaded Pennsylvania. That's why Gettysburg was so important, because it pushed the Confederacy out of Pennsylvania at a high cost on both sides. I believe 15,000 Confederates died on July 3rd. July 3rd, 1863. That's a lot of people. A lot of people. But the Southerners were determined to have their way, just like the Southern sympathizers were trying to have their way on January 6th. And remember, you have sympathizers in every police agency across this nation. Those rioters had sympathizers among the police. Even though the police did their job, there were still police sympathizers among the police who were sympathetic to the rioters. Anytime you got Clarence Thomas' wife paying for the expenses or the transportation of some of those people who took part in that riot, then you know you have a problem in America. And America may as well face it, because the genie is out of the bottle, so to speak, and the opposition knows that they have the good people on the ropes, because you can't trust our Democrats. You look at Manchin, look at Sinema, and those are just the most obvious ones. You have others who may not speak that language, but they are not going to let you move any kind of positive legislation through that Congress, and that Democrat or Republican, that would jeopardize the position of the power structure. Remember, Nancy Pelosi was dead set against Ilhan Omar, dead set against AOC, dead set against Ayanna Pressley, and there's one whose name I can't recall. But they were supposed to be able to rock the boat when they joined the Congress. That's what they were sent up there for. But Ms. Pelosi and the Democratic Campaign Committee, or Leadership Council, as they are severally named, are able, by their committee appointments and the committee assignments, to block, stop, and hinder any type of progressive action coming out of that Congress. And from any quarter, they can vote it down in committee, or they can vote it down on the floor. That's why you can't get you're not going to get no meaningful gun control legislation, because you got as many Democrats being paid off by the pockets of those lobbyists, those NRA lobbyists, as you have the GOP. Even though they say that the NRA has now just solely began to put their money in the pockets of the GOP. And so they own, the NRA owns the GOP. The NRA is, in other words, is the chief strategizer. That's why the Bible talks about principalities, powers, the rulers of the darkness of this world, spiritual wickedness in high places. And that is what you are battling against. And you must continue to battle. You better not give up. You got to fight, even though you have to die, as the old songwriter, hymnologist said. As I close out, thank God for those that have worked so diligently through the pandemic and through the plague, and the frontline workers, and all of you are frontline workers. You work at a grocery store, you work at the 99-cent store, you work at the dollar store. You are very important, because if you don't do your job, all of us will what? Perish. And that's one thing that we are finding out daily as they talk about the baby formula shortages and then these other shortages. So as I've always said, and I continue to say, if you're working on a job, God bless you, and get as much as you can for your labor, because once you put your labor out there, you can't get it back. And if they don't want to pay you, take my advice, don't work for them. All right, Doc, we out of here. Thank you now.